Hi, this is Lisa at Wild Eye Embroidery. Today I'm going to show you how to do different versions of the woven wheel stitch. You can get your free template to practice on at my website at www.wildeye-embroidery.com. So we will make a start with the first 5-spoke woven wheel at the top. Now I have already separated out my thread for this one. That just helps the stitches lie nice and flat and gives it a little bit of body. I have a separate tutorial if you need to learn how to do this, and this is one of the few stitches that I will actually start with a tied knot, so you can do the same. So we'll come from underneath, and I will start at the very top spoke. And for this you're just doing a straight stitch right down into the centre. So when you're making your spokes, don't pull your thread too tight, but not loose either, just a happy medium. It's these spokes that actually support all the rest of the floss that you're going to weave in and out shortly. And again, just straight into the centre. Right, to complete the rest of this woven wheel, we are going to weave our threads over and under the rest of the stitches. So because we're doing that, it's really important that these stitches are secure. So what I will do is flip my hoop round and secure these at the back. Now your stitches should look something similar to mine. So I will weave my needle in a couple of times and then make a loop, and just to fasten these off so they don't become loose. I like to reverse my needle because if you use the pointy end you can catch the threads and it can get stuck, so I use the other end. And we'll weave once more. And this time I'm going to catch this loop as it forms and come in round the back and go right through the centre of it to create a knot. We'll pull tight on that, push the knot down, and then you can flip your hoop back over. And that extra little step just makes sure that those spokes are secure and don't get pulled. Okay, so what we'll now do is come up into the centre between two spokes. Now this is the last time I will actually pierce the fabric for a while, so remember we're going to weave in and under the stitches, not piercing the fabric as you go. So I'm going to work anti-clockwise, we're going this way. So for the first spoke I'm going to go over it. So if you can imagine that floss going that way, and then the second spoke we're going to go under. At this stage you can actually change from your sharps needle to a darning needle if you prefer, so you're not catching any of your stitches as you go, or like me you can just keep reversing your needle. So we're going under that second, remember, over the first, under the second. Now over this one, under the next one. So over, under. Now this first woven wheel that I'm doing, I'm going to keep it quite flat and quite tight so it does resemble a wheel. So the aim for this one is not to get the height when we're doing this. So over, under, and just take your time, and if you're doing a flat wheel, make sure that these loops here don't start bunching up on top of these. The aim in this one is to keep it flat. So over, under again. And just keep going until you run out of floss. Just flatten those lips out as you go. Okay, Okay, so I'm starting to get low on thread, so I will be finishing off this bit. So just to finish off, go over, and then just before I go to the next spoke, I'm going to go take my needle down this way. Now at this stage, flip your hoop over and secure the back of the threads. Now, just like before when we were securing the spokes, I'm just going to weave in and out underneath this to secure the ends of this floss. And this time we'll make a loop and put our needle under the loop right through it and pull tight to create a knot. Okay, you can now flip your hoop back to the front. So once again we will start with a knot and come up from the bottom. We left off at this side of this spoke, so we will begin on the opposite side. So as we start under, we'll go over this spoke and then under again. And continue on the same way. And don't be afraid to use your finger to make sure the threads are going the right direction and that they're nice and smooth. When you're getting to the edge, you'll find it harder to see your spoke, so use your finger underneath and just push up. That makes the life far easier for you. And make sure you're using your finger to stop these going too tight. Now, once you're at this stage, you'll find it very hard to see the spokes, but you no longer have to weave in and out. You can just make giant straight stitches and come round to any areas where you can still see either the spoke or the pattern edges. So I have a little bit of pattern showing here. You can maybe see it. So I'm just going to come round just to the other side of my spoke and go straight through the pattern line. So just one giant straight stitch. So this not only hides the spokes, but it also hides the pattern line. You don't have to go in the same direction. If you see anywhere you think it's still showing a bit, your pattern, you can come up near a spoke. And this time I'm going to go round this way. And I'm bringing the needle down just beside that last stitch. Again, use your finger to hold the thread down. Have a quick look, smooth out any stitches you think need flatten slightly. And then if you're happy you have everything covered, flip it over and we'll secure the back. And just like before, we'll weave our needle in and out through our existing stitches. And when you do it the last time, once again go through the loop. And pull it reasonably tight, but not tight enough to distort the stitches on the front. That is enough to secure that. You can snip off any loose threads. So as you can see, that is our first woven wheel stitch completed. I'll move on to the second one, but for this one I want to get a bit more texture, make it look more like a rose and less like an actual flat wheel. So I'll show you how you can do this one slightly differently. This time, instead of trying to keep the woven wheel flat, I'm going to try and get a bit of height into it and make it look more like a rose. So we'll do the things exactly the same way to start us off with. So once again, I've separated out my floss. Again, go to my tutorial if you're not sure how to do that. We'll come in from the top spoke. And again, I've got my thread knotted at the end. We'll go into the middle So keep your stitches reasonably tight, but don't overdo it. So just like before, I'm going to flip the hoop over and secure my stitches. And while I've got the hoop upside down, I'll just snip off the excess from the securing knot. So we'll just do a few weaving in and unders. Just weave in and out a few times. And then catch the loop as it goes through. Thread it through and create a knot. Now we'll flip back over to the front of the hoop again. Okay, so going into the middle, I'll come up between two of the spokes. First one will go over, second under. So over, under. And carry on doing that. You need to keep your stitches a little tighter in the middle, starting out. And now, instead of wrapping these stitches around to make a circle, I'm going to actually let this come up slightly on top of my previous stitches. We're aiming to get a bit of height and a bit of texture, so try and bring the floss so it starts slightly overlapping your previous weaving. So over, under. And again, I'm gently guiding the stitches into place. I'm just pulling a little tighter. You don't want them too loose. And every so often, just pull a little tighter. The idea is we're trying to create a bit of tension and tighten up the stitches so we start getting height instead of width. So once I get to about this much thread left, then it is time to change threads. So I will go down just before a spoke. And then flip over. And then just like before, it's time just to weave in and out to secure your strands. And then one last time. And I've left a lip, we'll just go through that and pull tight to create a knot. You can snip off the excess floss. So once again, I'm just starting with a knotted thread from underneath. Now we finished off by going down beside the spoke, so I'll come up the other side of it now. And going back to over, under. Again, let it overlap a little to get that height. I'm just using the fingers to guide the floss. And again, keeping my stitches a little looser now that we're almost finished. So I'm just at that stage now, it's a lot harder to see where the spokes is, so instead of weaving in and out through the spokes, once again I'm going to do my long straight stitches to finish off. So don't be afraid to switch between clockwise and anti-clockwise. Okay, so now that we have finished the last stitch, we'll flip the hoop over again and just secure the threads at the back. And once you've finished that, just use the blunt end of the needle and give everything a fluff up and make sure all your strands of floss are just sitting nicely. So we've now completed 2 woven wheels, identical pattern but just that slight difference in the technique. So now that we have finished both of the wheels, you can see that the one on the left is pretty flat. It looks a bit more like a lollipop. You could use it for a wheel of a car, whatever you happen to be doing. If you look over at the right one now, it is a lot more fluffy. This time I'm going to do the woven wheel with the centre filled with some French knots, so we'll have a go at that. I'm starting out with 3 strands of floss to do the French knots. As usual, I have separated the strands, so I like to work from the outer edge of the circle in the way. And I'm just going to do 3 twists. And if you're not too sure how to do a French knot, you can check out my other tutorial that's on my YouTube channel. Okay, so I'll just flip the hoop over and secure the back of the strands. So it's just a matter of filling in the rest of the wheel just the way we did before. The only difference, so instead of going into the centre, we are going to weave it round our French knots. Now this time I'm using floss that's DMC Colour Variations, and it just has some gradual changes in the colour of the floss, and you'll see this as we go along. It looks quite good for a flower. So I've got my floss all ready. I'm using 6 strands. Once again I've separated those and flattened them out. I'm starting with a knot just like before. So just like before, we'll fill in the spokes first. So I'll start from the outer edge and just poke the needle just in beside those French knots. If the French knots have slightly come over your line, don't be afraid to poke them out of the road and take the needle in underneath. Now let's flip that over once more and secure the spokes. So just like before, we will weave in and out through the spokes. The only difference is this time we'll start a bit further out due to the French knots in the middle. So we're going to come up to the left of a spoke. I like to start from the bottom, and then we'll go over, under, and this time we want to wrap the floss around the French knots. Don't be afraid to let them come up slightly and cover the centre ones. So over, under, and take your time and just keep repeating this process. Now once you get a full circle done, don't be afraid to poke the floss into the shape you want, because we want to come a little bit higher and slightly cover those French knots. We don't want to do a flat woven wheel like the previous ones. I'm starting to make the floss slightly looser. I'm not pulling as taut. This will give a more fluffy effect. So I'm getting a bit low on floss. I don't want to run out right on the edge, so I'm changing it a wee bit earlier than what I would normally do, but this will make it far easier. So once again, go to the left side of a spoke, take our needle down. Make sure you don't pull the floss too tight at this stage. So let's get that flipped over. It's time just to weave in and out to secure your strands. So when I was finishing off, I went down under this spoke. So that means I'm going to come up this side of the spoke. And then because we went under here, that counts as our under. So we'll go back to over and then under. Just use your fingers to build up the floss slightly to give yourself a little bit of height. So that was under, over, under. I'm just nudging the floss out of the road, it just helps me see the spoke. You can do the same if you like. And I'm at the stage now, it's very difficult to see the spokes, but I think it needs a few last stitches. So there's my spoke in here. So I'll just go to the side of it and make a giant straight stitch. And it'll come down at the bottom. Okay, so I think that's enough stitches, so we will flip over and secure the back of the floss. So we'll just finish off by giving our floss a little fluff up, make sure it's lying nicely and it's in a good circle. Okay, so that's us finished now with the variegated thread. So this time I'm going to show you a woven wheel using just 3 spokes instead of the 5. I find you can make it look a little tighter in the middle, it looks a bit more like a rosebud before a flower is opened. And also this time I'm going to mix the top 2 threads, so the peach and the pink. And I'm taking 3 strands of each and combining them together to make the 6 strands. And as you can maybe see, I've separated those out and just went pink peach and so on, so that the 2 colours aren't side by side. I've mixed them up. So starting out with a knot as usual, we will come in from the back of the hoop. Okay, just like before, into the centre. We'll flip that over and secure the floss at the back. Okay, so the exact same method is used for the 3 spoke as is the 5. So we'll come up in between the 2 spokes at the bottom, close to the centre. And over the first spoke, under the second. Over, under. I'm keeping these stitches quite tight and I'm just letting them overlap just to get a bit of height. It's much easier to do that with a 3 spoke than it is a 5 spoke. Starting to make the stitches slightly looser. And letting them build up on top of each other. And continue that. Okay, so now I've created it's like a lump or a mound in the middle. I'm just letting that get a little bit looser. We're focusing more on getting the floss around rather than building the height in the centre now. I'm just guiding that into shape. And I am keeping this quite loose. Okay, because I'm concentrating on building a bit of height, you'll find that you run out of floss far quicker for this one. So one last weave through and then let's get our floss changed. So I'm going to go to the nearest spoke and go down beside it. And just as before, flip over and secure that stitch. So I finished off by going down at the top spoke, so we'll come up the other side of it. And you can treat that as an under, so the next one will be over, under, over, under. Okay, at this stage it gets too tricky to see the spokes, so we'll start making some of those long stitches. And don't be afraid to keep your finger on top of the rows to guide everything, and make sure you don't pull any stitches by accident. And then before you secure the stitches at the back, just use the blunt end of your needle just to manipulate any of the stitches into place. I think that's looking good now. We'll flip that over and finish off. Okay, so now that I have secured the back of the floss, I'll just give it one last little fluff up with the blunt end of the needle. Right, let's have a look now at all of the roses together so we can compare them better. So we first of all started with the flat woven wheel. That was our 5-spoke. Then for the second one, still a 5-spoke woven wheel, but a bit more texture, a little bit more height in there. Then we went to the 5-spoke wheel, this time using the French knots in the centre. And then lastly, our 3-spoke wheel gives a bit more height in the middle, a little bit more fluffy, probably a wee bit more realistic if you're going for a flower. Definitely lots of height and texture in there. It's definitely the fluffiest. Now if I turn the hook to the side, you can probably see the difference in the heights. It's just the fluffier ones, a bit more 3D, probably more realistic. So thanks so much for watching the tutorial. If you find this useful, don't forget to hit the like button and do subscribe to my channel for my latest content. You can also check out my website www.wildembroidery.com for my latest patterns. Thanks so much. Bye bye.